Okay, I want to welcome you to the K-12 Blackboard Innovative Teaching Series. And today's session, Building a Better Blackboard, Best Practices for Staff Adoption of Your Blackboard Toolset. Now today we have an awesome presenter, Chris O'Neill, K-12 Solutions Engineer. And for those who may not have received the notice that we sent yesterday, our former presenter from Randolph Township could no longer make today, so we're very happy that Chris could step in. Welcome, Chris.
Good afternoon. Thanks, Jenny. I see we have another person joining, so I'm going to kind of talk slowly for just a minute while she gets connected. Or he.
Sounds good. Well, I'll cover a couple of additional housekeeping tasks in the meantime. Just a shout out to everyone. I'm Jenny Breister on the Blackboard marketing team, and I'll be serving as today's moderator, and I'll help field any questions from the group chat. And we are in the middle of building our BITS calendar for spring of 2018. So definitely ping me if there's a session topic or presenter that you're most interested in, or if you're interested in presenting yourself. There's folks like Sudu on there with us today who are used to being part of our BITS presenter lineup. So we welcome all ideas for the spring 2018 series. I do want to mention that every session that we do is being recorded, as it is right now, and you can search the K-12 Blackboard BITS playlist on our YouTube channel, and we'll post that link here as soon as I'm done chatting. And you can find this recording for today, as well as our entire series from this last season and seasons past. And in addition, you'll also be receiving an invitation to participate in our Blackboard Professional Learning Community, our Blackboard community site, and that's designed to augment the series. And it's an avenue for ongoing collaboration and dialogue, so definitely accept that invitation. And again, I'll put the link in the chat for us as well. So it's my pleasure now to reintroduce Chris.
Good afternoon, everyone. As Jenny mentioned, my name's Chris O'Neill, and I work in the Blackboard K-12 segment. And prior to that, I was a K-12 teacher. I taught in Louisiana in the U.S., elementary and middle school, and then I worked at the State Department of Education and then University of Virginia. And throughout all that, most of my work has been related to educational technology, either LMS specific or teaching online or just the integration of technology in either K-12 or higher ed. So along the way, I've spent a lot of time kind of working with school districts and working with school leaders primarily on how do we all, as an educational community, gain traction on our adoption of technology, whether that is an LMS or whether it's individual components of technology or even just technology integration as a practice in our university or K-12 schools. So that's kind of the angle that we'll talk about today is specific to Blackboard and the various solutions from Blackboard. How do we all kind of build a better Blackboard set at our university or our K-12 district? What are those questions we need to be asking of ourselves and of our districts and our organizations to move forward and make sure that we're getting effective use and growth from our various Blackboard solutions. I did have a quick poll. I know there's just a small group of us today, but we'll go ahead and try it anyway since there are 3 or 4 of us. I'm just curious from those who are in attendance, if you're the primary person responsible for training and or professional development in your either your university or your K-12 school. So if you see the little pop-up screen, you can just click on yes or no, and we'll just go through that quickly. So that's good then. That's actually helpful to know. It looks like everybody who's not a board staff person has answered yes, that you are the primary responsible person for professional development. So that's helpful, and we'll talk a little bit about that in just a minute. A follow-up question to that would be, on the technical side of things, are you also the person responsible for technical support as it relates to technology adoption in your organization? So you should see another poll up there now. Okay, a little less. A couple people are primarily responsible for or responsible for technology support as it relates to adoption use. A lot of times I know what we find either in the university or the K-12 is that is the same person, depending on the size of the university or the kind of human resources structure, and certainly in a lot of small K-12 schools, it is the same person. So we'll kind of talk about, again, from those two angles then. So, a lot of us are in organizations where we do spend a lot of money and time on technology, and obviously we want it to impact the district in the way we intend. So we have a lot of key questions to ask ourselves. So what I thought we'd do this afternoon is focus on kind of 5 key areas around successful adoption in either higher ed or K-12 as it relates to not only Blackboard specifically, as a key component of what we're talking about here. So we'll go through each of these 5. We'll talk about a few questions to ask of ourselves individually, and then also back at our organizations in whichever structure we work in, and kind of reflect on those and hopefully get some feedback from you all too along the way with these key areas. The first one that I'll start off with is strategic planning and leadership. And obviously, because if we all are one member of our organization, then how does this whole process, this whole organization, how does this whole structure move forward with these various technology components, either from a technical standpoint or from an integration standpoint as far as instruction goes. One of the big pieces that I worked on when I was back at University of Virginia is working with school leaders, school principals, and people at kind of ministries of ed and higher ed organizations on trying to study in those schools and districts what were the key factors that stood out that gave those districts traction as far as, for example, they bought this technology solution or they decided to go down this technology path and they had these goals in mind. Maybe it was increased student achievement, or it was increased collegiality and collaboration amongst faculty. What were those key factors that were in common in those schools where they did get traction in those areas versus those schools who bought a lot of stuff and never really seemed to get what they wanted to get out of it? And what we found is that there were some key factors amongst those things. Some of the questions that we focused on with those school leaders are what you see here, and I'm not going to read these questions to you, but primarily, where do these things fit in that we either decided to purchase or are going to purchase? Are they specific to a need in our district? Is it our university has decided this is our mission statement, our vision to integrate technology? And then where do these various tools fit in, these various solutions? The other key component is who are our key players. So if I'm in a college of ed or if I'm at the school district level, a K-12 school district level, who are the various people that can either make this successful or maybe even unintentionally be a burden to making this successful, unknowingly even? And thinking about who the key players are in our bigger audience and who is either on board intentionally or who maybe we have forgotten to bring on board. A thing that we've noticed a lot in school districts is we'll talk to a school district technology leader and say, how are things going, and are you getting the results that you wanted to get out of your technology tools? And we'll have that conversation, then we'll say, well, who all is involved? Part of this conversation. And invariably, we'll hear from a district, a district leader who will say, well, we're doing this staff development and we're doing this staff development. And then when I say, oh, well, what about, library media specialists? They'll say, oh, we actually, that's a good point. We don't include them. Or we'll say, what about assistant principals in your K-12 schools? Well, they actually go down a different track. We're not really involved with them. Or at the university, we'll say, oh, we don't include our adjunct faculty. And then what you realize is those people are huge assets as far as getting technology integration to do what you want it to do. So that's another thing that I would encourage us to think about and reflect on when we go back to our own organization is, are we unintentionally neglecting players in the big picture? And if so, how can we bring those people on board? Another key feature to think about is, how do we determine and establish expectations? So for me at a district level, if I just say, oh, we're going to start using our Blackboard LMS next year, we've decided to adopt Blackboard Classroom, and we want everybody to use it, and everybody's got to be on board. This is going to really help us. Well, what are those key specifics though around the expectations for use? Besides just I want everybody to do it, what are those things that you want me to do? If I'm a fourth grade teacher, this is brand new to me. what exactly are you asking me to do? Are you asking me to, integrate my gradebook into this? Are you asking me to, start off with just housing documents here? Or are we going to go full on in one academic year and say, I want you to have conversations online. I want you to allow students to collaborate or set up opportunities for them to collaborate. So for us, as the influencers and the people who are either directly in charge of professional development or at least have our hands in that arena, how do we determine these expectations? How do we work with our leaders, our deans of the colleges of ed perhaps, or our school principals or our superintendents? Let's all get together and say, we're going to go beyond just saying, I want you to use all this. What are the exact expectations? If you're pre-K through 3, these are the things we want you to do with your students. If you're 4th through grades, here's what we have as far as timelines or minimum participation for you. Then the other is, what do you want to happen at the end of, let's say, this academic year? Are there some big accomplishments that you can put down right now? We're about to turn a new year, turn into a new calendar year. What are some things that we can say, these things have to happen by the end of the spring semester or the spring academic term, however our district is organized? What are those exact things that we want to happen? Because again, if we don't set expectations and it's just kind of an open call for people to increase technology integration or to, a generic statement like make more use of our technology solutions, then we kind of only have ourselves to blame when people interpret that in different ways out in our schools and districts. So to set aside some specific accomplishments, by February, I want everyone to have discussions happening online collaboratively with students. By April, I want everyone to have given some assignments in which all students have an opportunity for blended participation. So they can do some of the work face-to-face, some of the work at home, some of the work inside Blackboard, whatever those expectations might be. But setting those things to say, here are milestones, here are accomplishments, and here's why we want these things to happen. The next piece that I really think is just the most important of all is professional development and support. Both the support meaning not just technical support, meaning things have to stay up and running, and I need, if I'm a teacher or a faculty member, I need someone to help me do this technical thing quickly, but also just support, meaning, I'm going to take a risk. If I'm a new faculty member and I've never used, Blackboard before, or I've never had an online discussion with my students before, I also need just kind of moral support and coaching type support from maybe my instructional technology coach or whoever that might be. The other thing I want to kind of talk about as far as what work has been going on over the years has been, a lot of times professional development is not necessarily direct referred back to those strategic plans that we just talked about a minute ago. So I can speak for a lot of schools I've worked with in the US where we will have conversations with them and say, oh, give us a talk about what kind of professional development you're offering. And we'll hear the whole host of things, everything from intro to Blackboard to the wonderful world of wikis. And the bigger question is, well, how are these things determined? How did you, as a professional development coordinator or a faculty member, how did you determine that that was the best professional development to offer? How did you come up with that? How does that relate to those milestones that you want people to accomplish? Because if you're going to ask teachers to take time to learn these new tools and to use these tools effectively, then of course they deserve to get the support, professional development-wise, that matches those milestones and those accomplishments. And then again, what data determines that? So if the goal is to say, I want students to have more opportunities to collaborate, why did you decide that that was the focus area? Is it because of school vision, or because you looked at student achievement and you realize there are ties to students collaborating and their willingness and their kind of attachment to school activities? And there's some good research around that too. So I'd ask you too to think about this, and we'll kind of chat toward the end of this session. What would you start off with first? Let's say we are focusing on this new year in 2018, and you're either starting from scratch or kind of combining Blackboard professional development with your own professional development. What would you start off with first? Would it be a low-level intro? Maybe it's 5 different workshops. Maybe you surveyed the landscape of your university or your K-12 district and said, actually, you've got people kind of all over the place. Maybe you did a survey or a needs analysis, or even just kind of a self-assessment, and you said we need to have 5 different workshops. Maybe those things are, heavy integration with student collaboration. People just don't know how to use the tool, or maybe it's just people don't even have an awareness of what the capabilities are of your various Blackboard solutions. There's some really good tools too for needs assessment. Of course, there's some already done that you'll find that are just Google Forms and Survey Monkeys and things like that. But I think looking at your own data in your school to say, what, even the university right next door or the school district next door is doing these PD sessions, but their students have different academic issues than ours do, or their community is different than ours. So the wonderful world of wikis doesn't make sense for us. It might make sense for them. I think one of the things that we've also found from teachers, whether they're K-12 or higher ed, is some teachers are so busy and swamped that they're actually almost resentful of being mandated to go to professional development that doesn't make sense for them. And I can say, honestly, as a former teacher, I was one of those. I'm so, I like technology and I like poking around. So if someone made me go to an intro to Blackboard, I would say, gosh, really, I already know how to do that. What I need personally is, I've got students that I can't quite tap into. So how do I use some of these solutions to get to students who I feel like I'm neglecting? So it's a lot of work, obviously, and I know people in this session know that. It's a lot of work on the professional development end of things to come up with those. But then at the same time, if you're not getting traction, then you're just kind of creating professional development just to do it. And so I think taking some time to do some sort of needs assessment on the front end as it relates to the extent to which your colleagues know how to use these various solutions, and then what do you want to accomplish with these things. Again, even though it's a trick on the front end, I think it pays off on the back end. Then switching gears a little bit on the technical support side of things too, we all know this too on this call, nothing is more frustrating for a teacher, a busy teacher, to have been convinced to use some kind of tool and then it doesn't work correctly. Because a lot of times maybe it's not really the tool itself, it's just, if I'm not a techie teacher and you made me figure this out on my own, maybe I took 8 steps to figure it out when in reality it only needed 2. But if I'm just not of that mindset and I don't have kind of on the call tech support to help me, then that makes me just even more frustrated next time. And we all know this too, nobody wants a teacher to come into your professional development session already not happy with the technology, because that's just a hard place to start. So I think thinking also about those audiences, as I mentioned it kind of at the beginning, is who in your audiences are being neglected, if anyone? And if so, where's that neglect coming from? Again, is it PD, professional development, is it tech support? But you'll find, and I love this comment from Sue Dupree, really every teacher is committed to things being better for their students, whether that's actual student achievement or whether it's more participation or it's more commitment to schooling, whatever those things are. But we're so swamped as teachers, it's only fair and respectful of me to say, just like you want me to individualize instruction for students, we'll do that for me to the extent that you can. So don't make me go to professional development that doesn't really have anything to do with me. I've got these needs as a teacher, so help me figure out how to get traction for my students. And most teachers really are just very excited about that kind of PD, knowing that it's been kind of customized. I just put 2 little quick slides up here that I'll share with you. One of the things I used to love doing when I was a technology coordinator is kind of these varied avenues of professional development. And sometimes I would joke with teachers and say, I do want you to come together either online, maybe in Blackboard Collaborate or some other solution, for just 5 minutes, because I hear a lot of people saying, oh my gosh, it takes me so long to grade stuff. So I would find things like that and just pick up on that and do a 5-minute professional development session in Blackboard Collaborate. Or maybe even if I'm physically in the same space with these teachers, pull them together just for 5 minutes and say, I'm hearing a whole lot of people say that grading is taking forever. I wanted to let you see this in Blackboard Learn. There's a really quick and easy way to get to a needs grading report. And for those of you using Blackboard Classroom, the same thing. A lot of teachers don't realize that there's some pre-done tools for them that make things like grading super easy. So if I don't have a lot of time this afternoon to dig through reports and do whatever and view everybody's work, I just am, overwhelmed right now. We're about to go on break, for example. I just have stuff I need to grade. So help me get to a super quick place and get some stuff done. And even that kind of professional development might be all I need to, relieve a little stress, get me prepared for more in-depth professional development down the road. So I think it's important to kind of look at the whole spectrum. Really in-depth professional development that gives me traction on the big items like student achievement, for example. But then also just, I'm swamped. Teacher, give me something that will save me 15 minutes a week and I will just be thrilled, with you. Couple more and then we'll get into some more discussions and questions from you all. One of the things that I think is important too, not only just from our standpoint, but from our leaders' standpoint, is, if you expect me to do these things, if I'm one of your faculty or one of your K-12 teachers, if you expect me to do these things, well, who else is doing these things? Because it's also frustrating for a K-12 teacher to hear, from either a principal or if it's a faculty with a dean to say, I really want you all to kick it up a notch with your use of Blackboard and these other tools, and then they never use them. So it behooves us as school leaders and professional development to help model these solutions and tools that we want others to use. So I think when we're creating professional development and creating, support workshops and things like that, we have to be mindful of how we're delivering those professional development sessions. So if we're saying things like, oh, we want you to use student collaboration tools, we'd really like you to use the discussion forums in a higher level way than you're doing now within Blackboard Learn or Blackboard Classroom or whatever it might be, then we need to set those forums up ourselves and model that. So here are some easy ways. I'm not just telling you, I'm not just suggesting you do it, but I want us to go in and I want you to see how I can use these various solutions to encourage conversations or to record conversations. Or instead of bringing you all physically together, let's just have a 15-minute, you devote 15 minutes this week to taking part in this conversation. The other is, even from the school leaders, either, again, deans, department chairs, school principals, assistant principals, if we're doing classroom observations and still doing those things on paper, or some old school technology, well, why not use something like Blackboard Collaborate? Or why not use our smartphone and take photos and immediately post those inside a discussion and say, hey, I'd like to get feedback on this. I saw this teacher using this instructional activity today. I really want the fourth grade teachers to go in and view this, 2-minute video I took. Because the benefit for that, again, is it's a quick and easy video that a principal can take, again, maybe 2 or 3 minutes of some kind of cool activity that he or she thinks is instructionally sound. Or maybe even the teacher just says, I want your feedback on this. So we're in a private, online LMS environment. Why not post that 2 or 3 minute video and ask teachers, I want you all to go in and give your feedback. Here are 3 specific questions I want you to answer about what you see here. Again, for me, it isn't somebody who is telling me kind of as my boss or my leader to do certain things. These people need to also walk the walk and not just talk the talk, so to speak. And again, that's the same for all of us who are in charge of professional development. I don't want to, send you out to professional development. I want you to see a really integrated professional development that's, discussions and live sessions and a social activity and some sort of task to accomplish and so on. And then the last piece I'll say about that is the other piece that I see happening more, and I just wish there was a way for it to happen even more than I see it, and I would love to get your feedback at the end of this, is to what extent are we using students to model some of this technology? Students are, naturally inclined, I think, maybe more so than a lot of us as teachers. And I'm not saying that necessarily in that whole digital natives way. I'm saying it more in, for me as a teacher, I've got 25 of you in the classroom and curriculum to, deliver and interact with you. And now you're putting technology on top of that. So now, I'm kind of nerve-wracked. But from a student standpoint, what have they got to lose? If they're not able to do it, then the lesson still goes on because you're in charge of it. So allowing students to also model this, telling the student, hey, I'd like you to set up and record, and can you, put people in groups in my Blackboard Collaborate session? Or could you create a discussion forum and break people into groups? Or could you show, there's a couple students who don't know how to do this, or could you go show Miss Smith across the hall actually how to do this? So letting teachers see too that, we're all kind of in this together, and this is how we're modeling this, is each of us has something to learn and each of us has something to contribute. So I think kind of taking stake of who here in our district or our school can contribute, and including students in that, is a huge benefit for everyone, students and teachers and leaders. This other piece that I think is in a way important, but also just fun, and maybe this is just my own kind of learning style, adult learning style, is I also want time that is not you as the professional development coordinator, and it's not you as my dean, and it's not you as my principal. I just want time to either chat informally or formally with my colleagues, meaning you don't describe or prescribe to us how the discussion forum should be set up or what exactly you want it to do in Blackboard Classroom. Maybe one of us can take the lead. If there are 5 of us as 4th grade teachers or the science department, whatever it might be, let us have some learning spaces. So create a separate group. If you're, let's say Blackboard Classroom, for example, if you're using Blackboard Classroom, create a little separate group where nobody else has access to it. Just the 5 teachers and maybe just the professional development coordinator that you're focusing on. People can post all sorts of stuff in there. Let's just upload documents, and I want to try out, if I upload it like this, how's it going to look to the students? I just want to poke around and play, not in a necessarily formal situation. And again, for me, maybe it's just a personal learning style. I love those times because sometimes I don't just want to receive your information as a school leader or as a professional development person. I might want some of your guidance, and maybe I want your expectations. And now, leave me alone for a little bit and let me go sit down with my colleague and just poke in stuff. So a lot of times we use that term as like sandbox area. So let me just go play, use the same tools that I'm going to be using with my kids or my students, but let me play without you directing me. And then one of the questions that I like to ask is, if our users of these solutions don't understand how to best share resources and collaborate, maybe that is the start of that, is say, I would love for you all to go in and use the sharing cart feature, because I saw so-and-so created a really cool interactive fraction lesson, and could you go in and use the sharing cart to do that? Well, if I don't know how to use the sharing cart, well, that's a feature that I need to know how to use. So again, for me as the professional development person, I want to give you time to explore. Maybe I just come in for just a minute and show you a quick feature that I think is going to save you time, and then I'm going to step back. So that way you know how to use these resources, and the resources themselves aren't a burden to you. One of the last big pieces we'll talk about now is the data side of things, and I will fully admit I'm a huge data nerd. So for me, this is a really critical piece to everything we do with technology. Is we've got access to all this information in these various Blackboard solutions and other tools. So what do we do with all that stuff? If you are, depending on which tools you use, you might be looking at X-ray, or you might be looking at IntelliBoard within Blackboard Classroom, for example. There's ongoing data for you as not just a classroom teacher, but as a district level person, as an admin user, and so on, that you get to pull from in an ongoing way that might help you figure out what professional development is needed. So for me to be able to model that again with my teachers, I might be asking questions like, what does our data usage tell us about our students? And here's one really critical piece that I think is important for teachers to know is, if you ask me as a teacher, I want you to build, a blended course for your, 7th graders or for your science teachers or whatever it might be. So I'm putting a lot of effort into, uploading resources, creating interactive activities, discussion boards. I need to know who's using what and to what extent. And if nobody's ever using the discussion board, then maybe I'm either just going to go ask the teachers, hey, I put some really probing questions in the discussion forums, but I noticed nobody's really taking part. And I can get that information from the analytics inside these various tools. So maybe it's just, to me, it might sound, superficial. I just know, why aren't people using the discussion forum? Because maybe there's a bigger issue there. Maybe the issue is, that's not an appealing tool to me for where we are right now as a faculty. Or maybe the issue is, it's me. Maybe I'm posing very engaging questions there, so people just go in there and look and go, oh yeah, cool story, and then move on, The other is from the classroom teacher standpoint. If I'm uploading resources and I'm finding videos and I go look at my data inside, again, let's say Blackboard Classroom, if I go look at that data and 17 of my students watched video A, but nobody watched video B, do I even need to create video B? Why is it that nobody's watching that second video? So there's a lot of data that I think is related to student achievement, of course, meaning students who did activity A, B, and C are performing better. But then there's also data that just helps me from a mechanical standpoint make best use of the Blackboard tools. If my particular set of staff or faculty really just loves live interactive tools, or they really gravitate toward video, well, then I'm going to work a little bit on, maybe recording myself in Blackboard Collaborate, some tutorials or things like that. So kind of taking a look at, again, not only just the mechanical data usage from these various data tools, but also the analytics on who has progressed in the way that I wanted them to progress. Is it group A of my students? What did I do differently for them in my blended course? Or maybe it's a fully online course. What did I do differently for them that they did, pass this quiz at a higher rate, or they did generate papers back to me that were more engaging, things like that. So I say that to say I think data is, again, it's kind of one of those things where a lot of us in education will go like, oh gosh, we have so much data, don't clobber me over the head already with data. But then at the same time, I think not making use of it is equally frustrating for us, because it could point us in a different direction, all the way from just instruction to professional development. Using some of these analytics that are just kind of already built in could be an easy way for me to figure out, wow, everybody in my science department is just using all these various tools, but nobody in the English department is using tool A and tool B. Well, I wonder why that is. Maybe I need to do a 5-minute little workshop on this, or maybe I need to do more than that. So keeping tabs on this data, which the benefit of where we are with technology nowadays is the data is just kind of constantly churning for us. So it's not like I have to put a lot of legwork into it like I might have done in the past. It's kind of easy and right there for me. So I'm going to kind of just recap basically what we just talked about. Then I have a couple more questions for you, and I'd love to get your feedback on a few things. Focusing on these 5 areas, basically. The leadership in my university or school district has to be involved and has to help guide, not independently, but with a team of people. Where do we want these solutions to go? And why do we want them to go in that direction? Just adopting and just using doesn't necessarily get us any further. It might make us more technology savvy, but maybe what I really want in this district is, there's a subpopulation of students who aren't performing up to our expectation. So I really need to focus on getting all of us on board, x-raying the entire district here and saying, we don't have much participation from whoever it might be, department chairs in our professional development, or we don't have a lot of participation from parents. So how do we get parents engaged? But again, kind of wrapping it back to that strategic leadership is we can't create these things and buy these things and put forth these initiatives without kind of tying them all together, not only just for efficiency's sake and making these tools effective, but also just out of respect for all the people that are being asked to do these things is, you tell me how this ties back to my students or my faculty, whatever it might be. Again, the other just kind of rehashing professional development is, again, building and tying this back to some specific need, and not only just a need at the district level, but to the extent that's reasonable all the way down to a teacher level. So if I think I want to do a whole workshop for everybody on Blackboard Collaborate, is that really the most effective tool to do? Maybe 30% of my users, whoever they may be, already know that tool and they're experts at it. Well, don't make them come to that. Let's do something different or create some other opportunity for them. The other is modeling, and I'll put the pressure on deans and assistant deans and school principals. When we're walking the building in these leadership roles, it behooves us as these school leaders to model technology in the way I want it used. So do I really need to call all the faculty together every Tuesday at 3:30 and let's hang out in the library for 45 minutes to talk about whatever it might be? Or why don't I just model using a built-in discussion forum, or do a Blackboard Collaborate live session for 15 minutes, or pipe in a guest speaker, wherever that thing might be. Going back to the collaboration time and space, also give me freedom as a teacher you've given me professional development and some direction. I'm looking at school data now. Sort of leave me alone and let me collaborate with my peers a little bit. And I'm not saying just discard me into a collaboration space, but there's maybe not necessary to hover either. Give some guidance and direction, pop in and out while people are collaborating. And again, the last, which we just spoke about, really is referring us back to data. So what has changed with our Blackboard use itself last year? Who's better off now? And if some subpopulation or some segment didn't make the advances you wanted them to make, where do I find that data, and how do I kind of dig down to the root cause of why that might be? And once I know that, well, then I need to go back to the top again. I need to go back and work with leadership, and I know sort of go back to professional development then. This kind of cycle of referring to the data and referring back to these other key components. I'd like to get feedback from you in the chat pod, or you can do audio if you'd like that. But if you're not familiar with the chat pod, it's kind of on the right. You'll see a little purple arrow. And if you click that, it should pop out our little chat pod. And I think the people that are online are there. But what do you think is the next step for you or your organization as far as advancing the use of Blackboard solutions or advancing the use of technology? And again, if you feel free to chat in the chat pod itself, or you want to use your audio, you should see a little microphone kind of at the bottom center of your screen. Anybody have feedback on that? Okay, no mic, that's totally fine. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd love to,
ahead.
if I could say, because if you could, let's while you're asking this question, we can point back to, I'm going to flip back to your last slide, because I think it's a good one to help get brain juices flowing. Sue, without a mic, your input is very valuable in the chat. And Muhammad, you've been vocal too earlier in the conversation, so would love to get your feedback either with audio or on the chat. But another way to look at it is, Chris, looking at these, we could say, are there some of these successful adoption areas where you've had, Muhammad or Sue, you've had success already and can see that there's some, kind of good momentum already built, and where is most challenging? That could be another part of the question, along with, where you see yourselves going next. But it's fine without a mic, so if you want to chime in on the chat. And maybe, Chris, while they're kind of gathering their thoughts, are there? Oh, good. Mohammed's got some stuff for us, so I'll let you take over again, Chris.
And Mohammad, I'm glad you brought that up. I think that is one of those things that, there's so much for us to do as kind of the technology coordinator types, that we sometimes get overwhelmed by the amount of data. So I'm just curious, from your standpoint too, and feel free to chat a response back to this, but do you currently use data to an extent that you feel good about, or is it more like a whole university-wide issue that you want to focus on? I know a lot of times, like I'll just pick from a K-12 teacher or a higher ed faculty standpoint, I know the data that's related to just me for the most part. So my fourth grade performance data, or I know my middle school math data, or wherever it might be. But I think also, making sure that as far as all these technology tools go too, we want to make sure teachers are able to use these in a way that makes sense for them. So I think that's a piece of the data too, is the usage data. We want to make sure that these tools are useful and easy to use and do what we want them to do. So looking at the data for how people are using these, I think, could be helpful too. And Sue, that's a great point. I'm really glad you shared that too, as far as the PD, moving that into Blackboard. I think it is kind of one of those things too. I'll be curious to see what you think about this, is, how we all kind of approach this with stages. So at first I just need to even know how to use the thing. And then I need to kind of, calm down my anxiety about using the thing, whatever the thing is, the Blackboard solution or whatever it might be. And then kind of that, almost like the models of adoption for students. That same thing for teachers then, because we're all adult learners in this too. So I need some time to poke around and grow, and then I need to find some way that it relates to me personally before I make the commitment to actually create content. So that's a great point to bring up. I appreciate that. And Mohammed, yeah, I'm curious about that. The focus is more on the usage. And it is, it does have to be a combo of those things, I think.
Also,
but one is, go ahead.
Oh, no, not at all. Just the first part of Sue's, because I know Sue's presented before on, having required PD in Blackboard as a way to, introduce teachers to, okay, well, they've got to go in to get us required training, and then they're now comfortable with it, so some of the more optional PD or recommended PD can kind of follow. I'm most curious, Chris, in working with some of our other districts and organizations, if you've found others to be doing that as well.
Yeah, I think so. And I love that point, Sue, that you brought up is kind of going back to that modeling thing, basically, is delivering the professional development in the way that makes sense. But then also that models what you kind of want to happen. So, telling someone about Blackboard, for example, or any of these other tools. And, if I'm going to say, let me call you all into the, library media room and do a PowerPoint on how to use Blackboard Collaborate. If I have to be honest, if I were still back in the classroom, I would say, are you kidding me with this? If this is a tool that we have faith in and there's research behind it, well then, let's use it in the way it's meant to be used. Great, and I appreciate that comment as far as collaboration in space, involving the more tech-savvy students too. I do think it's higher ed or K-12 teachers are so swamped, and that's not a gripe at all on their behalf. That's just the truth of how it is. So I feel like the more we can maximize the efficiency of their time. So call me together. That's totally fine. I'm committed to that if I'm a K-12 teacher. But make sure it makes sense, and make sure it makes sense for me. And then also, get rid of the burdens and the barriers if at all possible. And if it's a student that can do that, have at it. I think most teachers are totally fine with, at least to some extent anyway, totally fine saying, hey, I don't know how to use this tool. Can somebody figure this out? And even if it isn't somebody else figuring it out, if it's saying, I don't have time to use this tool because I'm so focused on, my math instruction, you put this thing together, then, how and do it. We'll collaborate as a student teacher and so on. Yeah, I love that. We're being sneaky introducing the concept of blended PD. I know it is, I think it's one of those things that we all focus on, what's the best use of these teachers' time? And I love thinking about that as, kind of, you didn't say this, but, it's kind of strategically stepping into this and trying to model blended learning in your PD this year. I think to me, with my work with the school teachers, that's just one of the most important things, period, is being a good model. Because the truth is, too, teachers have faith in their districts for the most part. And, relying on that and saying, I'm going to take a risk here, too. I'm not just going to make you come to an old school workshop where I make you all sit here and watch me do PowerPoint. I'm going to lead this professional development in a way that makes sense for you. And in the way that I think you could turn around and do with your students also. So great point. I appreciate you sharing that. I'm going to just skip ahead to a next question. I'm curious now, too, if you all have either resources or lessons learned that you would like to share. And the reason I bring that up, too, is because we're all on this call even from very different angles. So either prior K-12 or current K-12 or university or what it might be, kind of specific to this conversation today. So making maximum use of these Blackboard solutions and other solutions. Do you have specific resources that are either kind of your go-to place or lessons learned? One time we did this and it either bombed or it went really well. Again, feel free to either type that in the chat or Mohammed, if you have audio, you're welcome to chime in with audio as well. I'm going to paste a resource into the chat that I created a couple years ago, and I just recently updated it, and I'll tell you why I did this resource. I was kind of just harping on school principals, K-12 principals, because I was out in school districts a whole lot or out in schools a whole lot, and a lot of teachers would say, I have faith in this solution, or I have faith in my professional development person, and my principal is a great leader, except she or he doesn't even use the technology that she or he wants us to use. So this person says, hey, I really want you all to, kick it up a notch with your use of discussion forums. Or I really want you to start using the video collaboration tool, Blackboard Collaborate. So I was hearing that a lot. I was kind of going back to the principals, and a lot of principals were saying, again, and in their defense, they were just saying, that's not really what our background is, or that's not really what our role is. We're so busy, managing instruction and administering the building and those sorts of things. It's difficult for them to model professional development. So I created a newsletter, a little kind of like an online newsletter that I'll paste in the chat. I can get that link up real quick. And the point of it is for those teachers those principals who are just swamped, here's some quick and easy, almost like cheats for them to say, here's a quick way for you to lead some staff development in your building, to model those things that you want teachers to do. So I'll paste this in the chat real quick. And feel free to, I'm on Twitter, and I think you saw the Twitter handle at the beginning. I'd love to get your feedback on this also. What other resources like this could we share to make people's lives easier as far as using not only just Blackboard solutions, but the roles that we have being professional development leaders and people who need to model this use in their buildings? So that link that I pasted in the chat is really specifically geared toward like a dean level type person, or a school administrator, school leader type person, principal, and so on. But I feel like it's also appropriate for professional development coordinators to use those resources. And it's really designed to be almost like a little cheat sheet, a quick and easy way for a principal to say, here's 10 cool faculty meetings I could do this spring that aren't the old school calling everybody into the library at 3:30 on Tuesday sort of thing. So I'd love it if you all have resources, again, either to share on today's session, or in just a moment we'll put up the session or link rather, that you probably already know, is the Blackboard community. Because we have a lot of people who have such great intention, such great talent with delivering professional development, but they're so swamped with time. So the more we share these resources, I think the better. And again, we've got so much expertise out in the field. I feel like it's just a treasure of resources to share with each other. Any other questions or feedback or comments or needs from the group? That's a great point, Sue, and I'm going to ask you a follow-up question to that, if you don't mind chatting back. Are you specifically meaning kind of within your own school or within your district, or just the whole kind of ed tech community?
And Chris, repeat the question for the benefit of our recorded audience.
So, great, thank you. So the question Sue was asking or suggesting, my biggest frustration is that I know we are all creating the same types of professional development in isolation rather than sharing what we and others have already created. And again, I was kind of referring to, was she speaking to her specific school or district or the whole bigger community? And she wrote back and said, really all of it. And then Mohammed also reiterated that same thing. And I would totally agree. It's so, frustrating in a way, because those of us, everybody on this call and everybody in our education community really have so much to offer, and we'll spend hours and hours and hours creating this awesome resource. And then, I'll go look online and, I'll search and search and search, and I just think there's got to be this thing already created. Well, let me just create it myself. Well, then I create it, and I'll hear one person say, oh my gosh, this thing is awesome. Will you share it with me? So I do think that's a great point, is we create these things in isolation, whether it's resources or professional development. So for sure, using tools within Blackboard itself to either voluntarily lead a Blackboard Collaborate session with others within the school district or the school itself, but then also even on media is sharing and using hashtags and things like that. So I would love, maybe we could kind of stay in touch about this whole notion between this group of us, is how do we encourage that where we're not creating these things in isolation? Because gosh, everybody's so swamped. And let's say I created this principal thing. Well, you probably got 10 awesome things for higher ed faculty, and you've got 10 for elementary teachers or whatever it might be. So again, I think making a concerted effort to say, here's my resource. And I think just a quick funny thing to wrap up. I know we're kind of getting close to time. Is we're all humble too, I think, as teachers, in that, well, I think my PD is good, but I'm not going to put it out there because it's probably not as good as somebody else's. And the truth really is, it's fantastic. I've heard people say that, like, oh no, don't share my resource because people probably better stuff, and then I'll share it anyway, just the friends that I know well. And of course they get all this feedback like, oh my gosh, I wish I had this thing a year ago. So I think also all this kind of letting go of that humility and just saying, what, I'm just going to put this out there, people like it, have at it. I'm going to share it anyway. So I really love that idea, and I totally feel your frustration. And I think of course millions of other educators feel that same frustration as they're creating cool things and kind of in their own little island. So I think hopefully either in the Blackboard community here or on social media or wherever it might be, I would love it if we all kind of made a concerted effort. Again, maybe that can actually be one of our goals then for 2018, is to be better about sharing outside our own silos. It's a really good point. Thoughts or questions? If not, I'll turn it back to you, Jenny.
No, Chris, this has been such a thoughtful, engaging conversation. And I am absolutely certain that there are folks who are going to come back from holiday break and find this super beneficial. And I'm glad we were able to repeat some of the great comments from those that attended today. So thank you all for being here. And I'll remind everyone that we've got the recorded session, and it'll be available for you to send to colleagues as well. I'll send out a follow-up email with the recording and with Chris's deck and whatnot. So we'll make sure we get those resources out to you. So everyone, have a wonderful holiday season. Again, thanks to Chris. Looking forward to working more with you on all of this, great contact information that we can continue to share with our Blackboard family. And everyone have a really great break whenever that starts for you all. And we'll see you back in 2018. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you all.